Can flan get a little boring sometimes? Don't get me wrong, I love flan. But sometimes I just feel like I need something a little more exciting. Today, I'll show you how to make flan 3 different ways and 3 different flavors, giving you the best tips and tricks to make your flan perfect every time. So let's get started with the first one, coffee flan. First, preheat your oven to 325 degrees Fahrenheit. Next, let's make the caramel. Heat a small saucepan to medium heat. Then add 1 cup of granulated sugar, a tablespoon of water, and the juice of a lime. And just let it rest until it caramelizes. Don't touch it. Once it starts turning into a liquid and caramelizes, then swirl the saucepan or mix it with a wooden spoon or a silicone spatula. Be careful not to overcook the sugar because if it burns, it becomes bitter. Also, make sure not to burn yourself. This caramel is really hot. Once caramelized, immediately add to your mold. In this case, I'm using oven-safe glass cups. Swirl the caramel so it coats evenly. In this case, I'm going higher than usual because I want really nice marks so it looks like coffee. Caramel hardens fast, so move quickly. Once it's set, go ahead and set them aside. Now it's time to make the flan. In a large blender or deep mixing bowl, add 5 large eggs. Those need to be at room temperature. A pack of cream cheese. It's best if it's softened or not cold. Cream cheese is optional, but it really adds a richer, creamier, thicker, better tasting flan. But if you don't have it, don't worry about it. Then add a can of evaporated milk, a can of condensed milk, a teaspoon of vanilla extract, a tablespoon of coffee liqueur, I used Kahlua, a teaspoon of espresso powder, a tablespoon of instant coffee. I added a teaspoon of hot water and dissolved it really well before adding it to the mix. A teaspoon of ground cinnamon. If you're using a mixing bowl and whisk, then beat it or blend it completely. I'm using a blender. The key thing is to not overblend as bubbles form. So I'm using the blender on low. As soon as the eggs and the cream cheese are fully dissolved and mixed, then you're done. Do not overmix. If you'd like, you can strain the mix before adding it to the mold for a softer, nicer texture, or you can just go straight into the mold from the blender. Next, get the bain-marie or water bath ready. This is a French technique to gently bake or heat evenly. This helps the custard to cook slowly and evenly and keeps the milk from curdling. It's also known as double boiler, water bath, or baño María in Spanish. To achieve it, it's simple. Place your flan molds inside a bigger dish that's oven safe. Once set in place, then add hot water, but not boiling, to the base. The key is to have the mold with the flan covered about halfway with water. You don't want water to overfill to avoid water spilling into the flan or out of the dish. Then cover the top of the flan mold or molds with foil, securing it so it's nice and tight and fully covered. This helps them to cook evenly and not dry out. Then carefully place it inside of the oven in the middle rack so it cooks evenly, and bake it for about an hour if you set it to 325 degrees Fahrenheit. Quick tip, if you're pressed for time, you can set the oven to 360 Fahrenheit and bake your flan for about 25 to 35 minutes. An even better tip is, if you're really pressed for time, you shouldn't be making flan. Either way, about 5 to 10 minutes before the set time, check the center with the toothpick to see if it's almost done. The center should still be jiggly and not fully baked. Once most of the edges look pretty done, remove it from the oven and from the water bath. Place it on the counter to cool for about 30 minutes to an hour. Then move it into the refrigerator to finish setting fully, at least 4 hours or overnight. The key thing is to keep it covered or it will dry out. If you're using individual cups, there's no need to unmold. However, if you'd like to soften the caramel a little bit, you can sit them on a hot water bath for a few minutes before serving. And that's it! Now to garnish it, you can use whipped cream, espresso powder and chocolate, or even chocolate-covered coffee beans. Up next, you can quickly turn plain flan into a fall favorite with this easy and delicious pumpkin flan recipe. For this flan, same thing, we start with the caramel, and quick recap, it's a cup of sugar, a bit of water, juice of a lime, don't touch it, let it caramelize, and then coat your molds. This time I'm using tin molds instead of glass cups to show you a different way to do this. So once your caramel is ready, coat your molds and set aside. In a blender or deep mixing bowl, add 5 large eggs at room temperature, a can of evaporated milk, a can of condensed milk, a can of pumpkin puree, a teaspoon of vanilla, a pack of cream cheese, a teaspoon of ground pumpkin spice, a teaspoon of ground nutmeg, and a teaspoon of ground cinnamon. Whisk, beat, or blend so that all the ingredients are fully incorporated, but remember, do not overblend. For the water bath, I prefer to add the hot water last, but in this case I did it before because of the shape of the molds I'm using. It reminds me of little pumpkins, so I thought it was perfect for this flavor. Bake time and temperature times, same as the last one, it applies. In this case, I am going to unmold these, so you can either do a water bath to soften it, or just run a hot knife or a wet toothpick around the edges to loosen it, jiggle it, and unmold it, and garnish to serve. Up next, a rich, decadent chocolate flan with Irish cream. So good. Caramel, same as the previous two. In this case, I'm going to use a flan mold, so I'm going to cover all of it and make it nice and lighter than the previous, since I will be unmolding the whole thing. Once that flan is covered with the caramel set aside, let's make your chocolate flan. Mix a can of evaporated milk, a can of condensed milk. In this case, I used cajeta or caramel flavor instead of regular. A cup of heavy cream, 5 large eggs room temperature, a teaspoon of vanilla, half a cup of cacao. Note, it's different than cocoa powder. Cacao is more pure and it's healthier, whereas cocoa is higher sugar content. A piece of chocolate, I used 70% dark chocolate, a tablespoon of Bailey's Irish cream, that's optional, and whisk or mix or blend all the ingredients until they're fully incorporated, but remember not to overblend. In this case, I used an actual flan mold. What I love about it is if you stick to the quantities in the recipe, it fits perfectly. I also love that it comes with a lid that seals perfectly, and it fits inside a cake pan for the water bath. So I just have to make sure the water only goes halfway of the mold, and put it in the oven. Then, same as the other two flans, bake it, cool it down on the counter, then refrigerate it to fully set, and then unmold and garnish. To garnish, I added shaved chocolate, fresh fruit, whipped cream, mint, and a chocolate. Growing up in Mexico eating flan all the time, I thought it was a Mexican dessert. It turns out it's not. It comes from Europe. The French made creme caramel popular, but it's been around since like the Roman Empire. Go figure. So now you know how to give a modern twist to an old recipe. Now my favorite part. Okay, first off, I love coffee. So this one is one of my favorite flan flavors to make. I've done it before without the coffee liqueur, and it just wasn't the same, so I just always add it on there. Doing the caramel high and making it thicker, it made these really pretty marks. So if you are gonna do it like this, keep that in mind. And I love the idea of having the chocolate covered coffee beans on top. It adds that extra touch. So during fall time, when pumpkins are abundant and the weather makes you crave certain foods, the spices and the pumpkin in this flan just always hits the spot. Now just picture some coffee, a cozy blanket, some fall music. Oh, sounds divine. So speaking of divine, who doesn't love chocolate, right? But sometimes chocolate cake to me just feels so thick and heavy and rich. So this is the perfect way to get that chocolate fix without the extra guilt. Still hungry for more? Check this recipe out. While I go polish up those flans, they're so good. You click here, I'm going.